Hey everybody, and welcome to part 29 of the Bible study series. Guys, today we are in chapter 38. Alright, if you missed the last part, okay, please go back, get into it, because my goodness, we pick up in the story, the beginning of the story of the life of Joseph. This man, actually kid, he's 17 years old when we meet him, and we're getting into the whole story and what's going on and some of the things that God is doing and how it's, prophesying some things for his life. This story is absolutely incredible. All right, you need to really dig into that. Today in chapter 38, we actually take a slight break from that story. It'll pick up in chapter 39. And it's kind of weird because this story we kind of get focused in on Judah and this young woman named Tamar, and you might think, it's so weird. It's such a dramatic, just weird story, and it's like, why is this in here? And a lot of not so great things that are going on. And yeah, it's like, well, why is this in here? And it is in here for a very, very, very important reason. So the authorship divinely given for this is such a key chapter. We're going to get into it today, and then in the next part, obviously pick back up with the story of Joseph. And guys, you do not want to miss this whole story of Joseph and how God is going to work. It is absolutely mind blowing, I'm telling you. All right, but for today, here we go. We're getting into chapter 38. As always, please don't forget to pray before diving into this. And wow, let's see what we're getting into here. All right, here we go. It says, all right, about this time we just came out of where Joseph had been sold into slavery by his brothers. Okay, again, check out the whole last part if you didn't. He had just gotten sold into slavery, right, to those Ishmaelite traders, and then they arrive in Egypt, right there at the end of chapter 37, where they sold Joseph. Those traders sold Joseph to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. Potiphar was captain of the palace guard. And so, chapter 38, about this time, Judah left home and moved to Adullam, where he stayed with a man named Hirah. He's got a friend there. His name's Hirah. All right, and there he sees a Canaanite woman. We've already talked about, what's, this is frowned upon. Like, this is not a good thing where the men in this covenant family that's being grown, when they start going outside of it and start seeing these Canaanite women and taking them as their wives. Judah does this. All right, he meets a Canaanite woman and he marries her. All right, it says, when he slept with her, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son, and they named the boy Er. It might be pronounced I'm going to say Er. We'll just leave it at that. All right. Then she became pregnant again and gave birth to another son and named him Onan. Then it says in verse 5, she gave birth to a third son and she named him Shelah. All right. And at the time of Shelah's birth, they were living at Kezib. All right. And in the course of time, Judah arranged for his firstborn son, Er, to marry a young woman named Tamar. All right, this woman, young woman, Tamar, and this whole thing, this is what this chapter is about. Man, Tamar, just got to make a quick note of this, write this down, that she is also a Canaanite woman. Just through study and whatnot, she is a Canaanite woman. So we're already seeing a little bit of that, on Judah's part. His character, his frame of mind, he's not sticking kind of to what needs to be done, securing this covenant family. He's getting outside of the boundaries of things, and we're going to see, exactly how that plays out. And here we go in verse 7. But Er He was a wicked man in the Lord's sight. And so the Lord took his life. All right. Like, what are we just met this guy, and then the span of 2 verses, all right, the Lord takes this man's life. So, all right, when we say there's hardly any other information, and I don't think we really need to know much other than the fact that it says that he was a wicked man. And evidently the wickedness that this man had and what was going on with him and everything was just not going to, it was potentially driving a wedge. So the Lord takes his life, brings about justice. Remember, the Lord and his plan, it will not fail. It is going to go the way that it needs to go. So check it out. It says in verse 8, so then Judah said to Er's brother, whose life was taken by the Lord, right? Onan, the second born, Onan, says, go and marry Tamar, as our law requires of the other, of the brother of the man who has died. You must produce an heir for your brother. All right. I want you to recognize that Judah says, go and marry Tamar as our law requires. We have, a few set of laws that we've kind of encountered along the way here, but not a lot. They don't, we haven't gotten a lot of detail, as far as how these families are living and what laws they are, living under. But apparently this is one of them right here. We can actually go to Deuteronomy, all right? Deuteronomy chapter 25, kind of jumping ahead real quick, just to get some insight into this law. Deuteronomy chapter 25, verse 5, it says, when brothers live together and one of them dies and has no son, all right? Er had no son here with Tamar, all right? So the wife of the deceased shall not be married outside of the family to a strange man. Her husband's brother shall go in to her and take her to himself as a wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that firstborn son, that firstborn whom she bears, shall assume the name of his dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. All right. So, given a quick glimpse as we jump ahead into Deuteronomy, is exactly what that law is talking about and what that's meaning, what that's kind of putting it into perspective right here. It's what Judah says there, at the end of verse 8. It says, you must produce an heir for your brother so that his name can actually live on. Okay. And we're going to see exactly how that plays out. Right here it says in verse 9, but Onan was not willing to have a child who was not his own heir. All right. So whenever he had intercourse with his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground, and this prevented her from having a child who would belong to his brother. Man. So notice this, all right? He was not willing to have a child that would be his own heir, that would not be his own heir. He didn't want to have a child that would take the name of his brother heir and, go along that path. So he was selfish in that right, all right? But he was certainly willing to enjoy, the aspects of sex and the physical relationship with Tamar, all right? He just did not want to fulfill the requirements of the law to produce an heir that was going to be his brother's and not his. All right, so every time that they had sex together, he spilled his semen, onto the ground. All right, and look what it says about this in verse 10. It says, but the Lord considered it evil for Onan to deny a child to his dead brother. And so the Lord took Onan's life too. Oh man, whew. We're a few verses into this thing, and you know what? We've seen a wicked man and heir. Lord says, nope, all right, this isn't happening. And we see Onan, right, who the law requires for him to take upon for his brother, take Tamar and produce an heir for his brother. And he's like, nah, I ain't down with that, but I'll enjoy Tamar as my wife and all the physical sides of it. But yeah, I'm not producing a child. The Lord says, that is evil. Nope, you're out of here, buddy. All right, so it's like, man, what in the world is going on? More on this whole law, what the study Bible says. It says its purpose was to ensure that a childless widow would have a son who would receive her late husband's inheritance and who in turn would care for her. And so it's like, man, where's this story going? What is going on? We've got firstborn son to Judah, dead because he was a wicked man. His widowed wife tells the next son to go and marry her, and he does evil and he's gone. Lord takes him out as well, and it's like, all right, holy cow. So what happens is Judah, he starts to pick up on this whole kind of theme that's happening here. And so he tells Tamar, he's like, go back to your parents, go home and remain a widow until my youngest son, my third son, Shelah, is old enough to marry you. But check this out. We've heard deception before in this whole line, and here it rears its head again. And it says, but Judah did not really intend to do this because he was afraid that Shelah would also die. He is seeing the theme here, all right? Like his two brothers. Tamar, she goes back home, right, to live at her father's. And some years later, Judah's wife dies and everything. And it picks up in verse 13 where someone actually tells Tamar, this is sometime later, they tell her, they said, look, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So in verse 14, it says, Tamar was aware that Shelah had grown up, but no arrangements had been made for her to come and marry him. All right, so she knows that the proper amount of time has passed, and she's completely aware that Judah has not gone forward with arranging the marriage, between her and his third son, his younger son, Shelah. So look what she's gonna do. She changed out of her widow's clothing, and she covered herself with a veil to disguise herself. And then she sits down beside the road at the entrance to the village, all right, which is on the road to Timnah, right, where Judah was going. All right, she's waiting there for Judah. All right, look how this plays out. Look at what she's going for here. Verse 15, it says, Judah noticed her and thought that she was a prostitute, since she had covered her face. And so he stopped and propositioned her, and he says, let me have sex with you, not really realizing that she was his own daughter-in-law. They go back and forth as far as the payment. How much will you pay? He says, I'll give you, a goat, a young goat from my flock. He's like, all right, but I don't have a guarantee of that. What kind? And he's like, well, what kind do you want? How can we make this arrangement proper? So she says, leave me your identification seal and its cord and the walking stick that you are carrying. All right, identification seal. It was something that was unique. I like what the study Bible says. It was used to authenticate legal documents. This was something sort of in the line of like a ID card, if you will, something with a unique design pertaining to, its owner, right? So specific to Judah. So she's like, leave me your identification seal, its cord, and the walking stick, so I can hang on to it, and there you go. And so Judah, he gives them to her. Then he had intercourse with her, and she becomes pregnant. Hang on, because you might be thinking, man, this is the deception, and look at where this has gotten, and everything like that. And who has a pretty cool turnout in a sense. Watch. All right. So later, Judah asked his friend Hera to go take the young goat that was promised to the woman, right, to the prostitute. Um, Hera, he can't find her. He goes to the men who live there. He's like, "Hey, where's this prostitute, the shrine prostitute? Where is she?" And they're like, "We have never had a prostitute here. What are you talking about?" So Hera goes back and tells Judah, like, "Dude, I can't find her." Ask the men. They claim that they've never had one. And then Judah's like, "All right, well, Jen, just let her keep the things I gave her. Right? We sent the young goat, as agreed, but you couldn't find her. So let's not go back because otherwise we'll be a laughing stock." Verse 24. About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Hey, guess what, Judah? Tamar, your daughter-in-law, she has acted like a prostitute, and now, because of this, she is pregnant." Oh, and what an amazing response our man Judah has. Look at the character of this guy. "Bring her out," Judah says, "and let her be burned." Oh, man, what in the world? Talk about a double standard, right? So Judah is obviously clear, being able to, have a prostitute and whatnot. But when he finds out Tamar is, he's like, "Dude, you're gonna be burned alive." It's like, dude, what the heck's going on, man? So, like the study Bible says here, I like this. It's like Judah saw no harm in hiring a prostitute for himself for a night, right? After all, he was more than willing to pay. But he was ready to execute Tamar because if she was pregnant as a result of prostitution, then his grandchild would not be part of his family line. And I find this a bit interesting. Okay, I know, I get the feelings of it all. But when we go back to the very beginning of this chapter and Judah's decision to marry a Canaanite woman in the first place, all right, then give, his firstborn son in marriage to Tamar, a Canaanite woman, it's like, man, his decisions weren't quite even really leading up to, I guess, this desire to protect his family line to begin with. So it's a little bit odd. I mean, I get it, but it's just it's a little wishy-washy. You know what I mean? And so it says, apparently the question of sexual morality never entered Judah's mind. His only concern was for keeping his inheritance in the family. All right. So the way that he reacts here, he's just like, burn her. Oh my gosh, what a disgrace. Look what she is doing, destroying potentially, the family line. Why does he care so much about it now when he's gone the route that he has? All right. So as they are taking Tamar out to kill her, she sends a message out to Judah. She says, "The man who owns these things made me pregnant. Look closely." She's smart. "Whose seal and cord and walking stick are these?" Boy, in verse 26, Judah recognized them immediately. And check out what he says here, folks. This wraps up, like, why is this here? And oh my gosh. He says, "She is more righteous than I am, because I did not arrange for her to marry my son Shelah." Boom. All right. So it's funny. We go back to the study Bible notes, and it says, ironically, check this out. A great note. Ironically, right? Judah's so wrapped up in my family line, the inheritance. We talked about he's a little wishy-washy already to begin with some of the choices that he's made, okay, and how he's acting. It's just not quite solid. And it says, ironically, it was Tamar, not Judah, who acted to provide him with legal heirs. By seducing him, she actually acted more in the spirit of the law than Judah did when he refused to send his third son to her. Ooh, you guys catch that? So in verse 27 it says, when the time came for Tamar to give birth, it was discovered that she was carrying twins. This is crazy, watch. It says, while she was in labor, one of the babies reached out his hand. The midwife grabbed it, tied a scarlet string around the child's wrist, announcing, this one came out first. But then, in verse 29, he pulled back his hand, and out came his brother instead. The midwife's like, what? How did you break out first? And so that child's name was Perez, which stands for breaking out. All right. Then the baby with the scarlet string on his wrist was born next, and he was named Zerah. Zerah means scarlet, all right, for the scarlet string that was tied around the wrist. And we think back, to this whole story and everything. We know with Judah, he has 3 sons. 2 of them, the Lord takes their life because of their wickedness, right? Their evil, the sin that was in them. Okay, and because of this woman Tamar taking the initiative and in the spirit of the law, the way that she acted, okay, to cause this to come about, man, is absolutely crazy. To where what Judah said there, she is more righteous than I am, because I didn't arrange, I withheld, my son. She is more righteous than I am. But look how it's almost like a replacement. The 2 wicked, evil sons, were taken, and through this action, through the story, comes these 2 sons right here, Perez and Zerah. And guys, we talk about, the importance of this and everything. It's crazy, okay? And it says here, just to kind of tie this off and wrap this up, why this is so important, why this line of Judah, even, this is messy. The line, it is such a messy line, but what comes out of it, what comes out of this whole story of just messiness and just humans doing things, comes absolute beauty, power, salvation, eternal life, everything. Because it says, incidentally, Judah and Tamar are direct ancestors of Jesus Christ. Everything in this mess that is happening right now, guys, is all going to flow, and down the line eventually is going to come Jesus Christ out of this. And man, it is nuts. It is so crazy. And we're actually going to see a similar type of story. It's set up, in a similar way, except, in this story, which is going to come up in the book of Ruth, we're going to see where it's done more properly, with more faithfulness. All right, and again, it's ultimately going to lead. It's such a small book. The book of Ruth is a small book, but what happens there and how it's so faithfully done and what takes place just provides the next step, the next piece in the puzzle, which again is going to lead to Jesus Christ. And man, I'm telling you guys, so why is this brought up? It seems so insignificant, and it is not. It is so significant, and we just have to hang on to these things as we continue reading through, so that when we get to those points and we think back to this point, we're like, wow, how did this all come together? This is insane. It's like, yes, it is. And it is God. It is the Lord working this out in such an amazing way. And all right, when we get to chapter 39, we're going to continue to see that amazing work of God through everyone's life. And specifically, we're going to pick back up with Joseph and watch just what happens. It is it is absolutely insane. It is crazy and so amazing. So guys, till next time, get into this, read into it. It's awesome. All right, love you.